Welcome to the Pop Culture Lab, where we break down your favorite movies and TV shows. This week, we're reviewing Barbie. Connor, let's get in the lab. For some reason, it smells a little nicer in here.
Oh, yeah.
It doesn't smell like BO and beer.
Yeah, it doesn't smell like farts and armpits. What is that?
I think it's our friend Katie.
It's me. You let me in, and joke's on you. I have decades of experience bossing you both around, and you cannot get rid of me after this.
Clearly, because you must have passed right by the "No Girls Allowed" sign on the office door.
Yes, this is arguably the opposite of Barbie Land in here. Are we in the kingdom?
We are in the kingdom, yes.
Yeah, the patriarchy is alive and well in this podcast.
We have our horse-themed lampshades and everything.
If only, arguably, Ken knew about Batman, maybe he would have been more successful with the patriarchy.
Ooh, that's a good plug. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, That's a good Halloween costume idea for me. I'll be Ken meets Batman.
Ken Batman? That could actually be pretty good.
Ken Man. Ken Bat. Bat Ken. All right. Nice to have you here, Katie.
Absolutely welcome.
So excited to be here and talk about one of my favorite movies of the year.
Me too.
A little Oscar preview.
Absolutely. Well, I hope so. Certainly for Greta. We'll see what the Academy does with a movie with this much pink in it and this many musical numbers. I think it's been a while since the Academy's seen a dream ballet.
That's
Listen,
true.
if the strike continues, we might be in luck.
Good point. He's like, yeah, what else is there to give out
Just
awards to?
Tanya hardening the competition, just like taking them out of the legs.
Yeah, it's actually just like a dune-like desert out there, ironically, for movies. And they're like, well, we've got Barbie, Oppenheimer, and a lot of dust. Let's give it to them.
Well, and
Listen to these. Sorry, just hold on. Listen to these references. Do you even realize that you just quoted or you referenced another Margot Robbie film to make your point? And like Dune too. It's like, damn, this is fire in here. My goodness.
Well, I mean, and with how well this movie has done, I feel like the Oscar's going to be all over it just because it's bringing people to theaters.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. A little bit of a Top Gun Maverick kind of situation.
Yeah. Production
design should get something. I know you agree, Katie.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this movie's production design was so good that I think when I first saw it, it's so good you don't notice it, which is, I think, the art of it. It was only after the movie and reading about it, it was like, oh yeah, the playhouses were doll-sized. Oh yeah, everything is designed to have this artificial 1950s, like Singing in the Rain feel to it, and all of that is so intentional. But when you first watch it, I mean, the movie's just so funny. You're just wrapped up in laughing at the jokes and thinking about the patriarchy.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah, and well, I mean, yeah, like you said, it is kind of seamless, the production design, and it doesn't like overly draw attention to itself, but the details are all so good and no CGI. It's so refreshing. It's all built. It's all there. You can tell. I mean, I think of like the moment when the Matchbox 20 song is being played on the guitar, and just the fire is this
and I will.
But even like the fire is this like fake thing. Like, I don't know. They just every single little thing was so well thought through in that way.
I love when they're throwing the costumes off of the balcony of the dollhouses and they're like kind of flaring out.
Yeah.
She's driving the car and she's just not even actually driving. She's just waving with both hands at everyone.
That's true.
It doesn't have an engine.
So great. Well, let's dive into what we've been watching. Let's start with you, Katie.
Let's start with our guest here.
Well, I'm so excited to bring some, as you said, more X-chromosomal content to the podcast.
You're kidding. We talk about such a wide variety of things.
So I've been watching a good mix of lowbrow for the summer and highbrow things. On the lowbrow end, I would say I've been watching The Summer I Turned Pretty on Amazon Prime, which is based on a series of YA romance books, which I have also read. And the books themselves are flaming garbage. And the show itself is a little bit of garbage, but everyone on the show is so hot and so angsty. And the entire show is soundtracked by Taylor Swift. I don't know how they got this budget.
Jesus.
And it's amazing. Every single woman I know, it's coming out week to week. every single woman I know is just going, I can't believe I have to wait another 7 days for another episode of this show.
Oh my God.
And it is all just romance and angst, and it is so good.
So not flaming garbage, but more like glowing garbage.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's spicy.
A nice ember.
Oh, yeah. That has been filling up the lowbrow end of my content. On the highbrow, I've been working on watching 10 classic movies this year, at least.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of one of my ongoing film projects to knock out some of the older classics.
Great goal.
Yeah, and I just watched 12 Angry Men for the first time.
For the first time?
For the first time.
Oh.
And it blew my mind. It was so good. It was like a thriller. We were on the edge of our seats, and then, of course, you go, and after every single movie, I read every single thing I can about every single movie, about the cinematography and the decisions and the meaning. And it's just one of those movies you can just keep digging into. Oh, I just absolutely loved it.
That's such a great movie. I mean, I like the performances in it are incredible. The dialogue, I mean, it's so tight. Like there just isn't a moment of dead air in that whole movie. You're just, like you said, on the edge of your seat. You're, following every character and every little strand of the story. And, I feel like because it was a play first, particularly you're talking about the black and white, like Henry Fonda version of the movie. Because it kind of feels like it came from a stage play in terms of the way it's shot, like the craning shots from the camera, and because it all takes place in one room, basically, you feel the stage play of it, but at the same time, it's translated to the screen like completely. I guess what I'm trying to say is like it somehow, the way it's shot and made, like harkens back to its history as a stage play while also making it very, very cinematic. I've always been blown away by how that movie is just presented to us, Yeah,
it was so interesting to watch it and know it's all in this one room and it's black and white. And I know there's always this bias, probably not in this room, but there's always some bias against watching kind of older black and white films. But the way that it's supposed to be on like a hot summer day, and the entire movie, you totally get the sense of how hot everyone is in the room. And then the fan breaks and a storm is rumbling outside, and how that helps build the tension of the movie of all these men who just want to get out of this room but can't because they have to talk about what the right thing is.
Right.
It's like a thriller. Mm-hmm. Oh, it was wonderful.
I totally forgot about the heat element. You're exactly right. It's almost, have you seen Do the Right Thing?
I actually haven't, but I've heard this movie compared to it for just that.
Is that on your list of classics for this year?
It should be. It's certainly a classic.
Yeah, if you're talking about the heat being like almost a character in the movie and in terms of how it drives the tension, it's exactly the same. Yeah, that's awesome. And actually, I'm going to have to tell my now wife.
Ooh.
Very excited.
Announcement.
Yeah, announcement to everyone. I'm going to have to tell her about the summer I turned pretty because I think I'm not going to see her for like 2 months once I tell her. I'm sure
be careful with that recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. You got any more?
I do. I've been watching quite a few things. On a completely other end of the spectrum, I just watched a movie called Summit of the Gods on Netflix.
Ooh.
It is an animated movie from a few years ago. It's a French production, but it's about characters in Japan, and Japanese characters, and it's a Japanese journalist who becomes obsessed with some mysteries from some men who had historically climbed Mount Everest. And he's tracking down this famous man who had climbed Mount Everest, and it's all beautiful animation. And it ends, basically, the third act takes place on Mount Everest, and it's amazing watching animation of some of the parts of a mountain or parts of the world that you so rarely see, and it's so hard to get footage of. But you can animate it.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And the way that animation lets them tell a story about what it's like to be a mountaineer, I feel like really unlocks being able to tell stories like that versus just getting footage. Where oftentimes with the Alpine movies, it's just like, oh, can't you believe they're on the side of a mountain? This is amazing. But they were able to tell like a richer story. And so it's kind of a mystery adventure and just a beautiful film.
That's a really good recommendation. That sounds really interesting to me.
Yeah, that's very cool. I mean, and I totally hear what you're saying. Did you ever see Everest, the movie?
No, I didn't. I would say I have not seen a lot of the mountaineering movies because, again, to me, they often seem like look, we're on a big mountain. It's difficult.
Sure.
And it loses me there.
Right.
But
oh my
this
God,
one got me.
my pick fell. What am I going to do? Ah. Yeah.
Like what's the one where the guy gets crushed by the boulder? Not on Everest, but
127 hours.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like, there's a certain quality to, if you've seen one of those movies, you've kind of seen them all. And so I what I'm interested in is, like, do they get into the mapping, the topography of Everest in terms of the animation? Like, do they try to map it out for the audience at all? No.
No, not really. It's really about, there's a mystery about the first man who summited Everest or did a certain ascent of Everest, but they don't have proof of whether or not he did it because he died on the mountain. And there's this camera that's left on the mountain that this journalist really badly wants to go retrieve. And so he's trying to hunt down the camera, and comes in contact with another historic climber of the mountain. So it's really about one certain ascent and trying to do that. But it's fascinating. It's really just more of an interesting fictional story set on Mount Everest.
So in some ways, it sounds like you like it because it's a bit of a smaller story instead of trying to do this, like, whoa, the mountain, and it's so big, and then nature versus man, and
Exactly. I tend to like the smaller stories, even if it's set in a big place.
yeah, very cool.
Summit of the Gods is what you said? Mm-hmm. That sounds great.
Like that.
Yeah.
And Netflix?
Yes, believe so.
Cool.
Well, I'll jump in here.
Yeah.
I have been watching a lot of things. We haven't recorded in, 2 or 3 weeks, I think.
Yeah.
And so we've had some time to catch up on things.
Sorry, everybody.
Yeah, sorry about that, especially Alex. We have, I've watched a handful of things. I want to briefly mention that I finished Station 11. I've already talked a lot about it on here. Just go see it. I'm not going to talk any more about that show, but just go watch it if you haven't already.
Connor has yet to start it, but he promises he will.
How have you not seen this show?
You've seen it?
Oh, man, that's another one.
Gosh.
That's 3.
This show
Damn
just crawls into your heart and makes a little nest there. It's so wonderful.
Oh, good Lord.
Jeevan, I just love that guy.
All of them. Oh, I need to rewatch
Jeevan
that.
Christ, listen to you two.
So yes, go watch Station 11. I also watched a couple of movies with Connor. We went over to our friend Nate's house. He has an incredible movie theater in his basement. And so we watched Mad Max Fury Road, which I had not seen before. And it was worth the price of admission, which was nothing.
So it was worthless.
So you hated it?
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. It was really, really good. It was perfect for that kind of a setting. He's really put a lot of effort into making it a really cool movie theater experience, as you would expect if you've ever met him. And so the sound was incredible. The picture was incredible. It was a like being on the Indiana Jones ride. When the
subwoofer's like under your ass, you really get something. And we had a bit of a false start because we were he decided to like rent it through Apple TV or something, like just basically streaming it first. And it was fine. I mean, his whole setup is great, but the internet's the internet. And like we were watching it, and I was like, there's a little bit of like, why is the picture not super clear here? And so it was so funny because the whole time he actually had it on Blu-ray. He just opted not to do that. I don't know why. He was like, well, here, I've got it on Blu-ray. It's like, well, okay, Nate.
Sounds like he's anti-physical media. Controversial stance.
He has so much. He has like...
Oh, I'm sure.
Like floor-to-ceiling just stacks of movies on Blu-ray.
It was very, very ironic. But once the Blu-ray came on, it was phenomenal. I mean, the picture was perfectly clear, and I'm glad you enjoy it. That was one of my favorite movies that year. That's one of the like most visceral and incredible like kind of action movies that I think I can think of. It was
a blast. I will say I was a little underwhelmed by Tom Hardy. I think like he was doing this weird accent in it, which kind of threw me off a little bit.
He talks like this the whole time.
Yeah, like I don't know what he's trying to even do there. He was fine. Like that's not really what he. I mean, you don't need a lot out of like an action hero like that. I don't know.
I would also argue he's not the protagonist of that movie, so it doesn't matter.
Who would you say it is? It's
Furiosa.
100%.
Yeah, Charlize Theron. Yeah,
without a doubt, 100%.
I also feel like the first few times we saw Tom Hardy do things, we were like, oh, that's so funky. There's such an edge to that.
Yeah.
And then you realized he really only has like 3 tricks and he just keeps doing them over and over, but like slightly different. And you're like, oh, okay, it's that trick again.
Right.
All right.
Well, I
We'd
guess
love if you tried something new.
that's the thing is that, I can forgive the weird accent in The Dark Knight Rises or whatever because like it's a one-off. It's like, okay, whatever.
What are you talking about?
Yeah, it was a kind of a weird movie anyway. So I was like, okay, maybe that's just a one-off. I was going to forgive that. But then you see it again in Mad Max Fury Road, and I'm like, okay, what are you doing?
And in The Revenant, he just mumbles his way through The Revenant. I don't know when the last time you saw that is.
And he's pretty weird in Dunkirk, too.
Oh, that's right. Again, Christopher Nolan puts a thing over his mouth.
No.
It's just so funny.
Yeah.
That's so true, Katie.
But it was
Oh my God.
fun. It was a fun movie. I thought that the plot is like not really what it's about, frankly. It's mostly just about being in this dusty world. And
Well, no shit. They literally go one way and then they turn around and come back. That's the plot.
Yeah.
That's it.
We because we watched it on streaming first. Like we were all like settling in and stuff, and there was Haas, who's Nate's dog, was there and everything, and so we weren't really paying close attention. And I was like, sorry, could somebody explain like what just happened in the first minute of the movie? And Saw was like, okay, we have to start over. All of the plot of the movie is in this first minute.
I would have done the same thing. When it's a movie I'm excited for my friends to watch, I am so obnoxious about them having full focus.
Yeah.
I will pause it and go, all right, have you all peed? Do you have the snacks you need? Okay, no talking. Focus on the movie. Isn't this fun? Aren't we all having so much fun, you guys?
This is fun,
Why
right?
are you having fun?
That's so true. Oh my God, I can relate to that. Maybe a little too much.
So I watched that, and then the last thing I'll throw in here is I watched Top Gun Maverick with Connor over here, which was also very fun. He had been recommending it to me quite a bit. I tried to watch it on a plane once, and it was on really poor audio quality, and obviously, like on one of those TV screens, it's on the back of a headrest, and it was awful, so I turned that off. But we watched it, I think, at my house, and it was very, very good. I don't know if I enjoyed it quite as much as Connor does, because he has some more nostalgia around the first one, but I enjoyed it, of course.
Yeah, the moments you consider cheesy, I consider like...
Endearing
callbacks
Yeah.
to the original, Yeah, you're like, oh, another like sweaty football scene on
I
the
even
beach. I'm
said
like,
that.
Of course there's another sweaty football scene. Like, I'd be so sad if there wasn't. This is Top Gun.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But-
I loved Top Gun Maverick, which I don't have that much emotional connection to the first one, but anytime you're doing a reboot or a sequel and you manage to avoid some of the pitfalls that other reboots and sequels do, where there was fan service, but there wasn't too much fan service, or it felt like it was the right thing, and the fact that they then, approached issues like death and aging and are you still relevant anymore? And I loved the fact that there were little plot loopholes or questions you might have that they just hand-waved. They were like, no, that's not the point of the story.
Totally.
And spoiler alert, that's one of my favorite things about Barbie, which we're about to talk about, is when films are confident enough to hand-wave details. Like, who is this Peggy or Penny character? It doesn't matter. You don't have to think too hard about how they know each other. Just get into the movie. I love when a movie feels that confident.
Self-aware, yeah.
And then carries it off.
Yeah.
You're specifically referring to, Penny in Top Gun. Yeah, totally. And not that she did have some, like, importance to the plot and everything. I mean, an underdeveloped female character, to be sure. But I completely agree with you. Yeah, they just skipped over the whole history there. And, I also love that about movies, when they just kind of... it is confidence. It's like they focus on what matters because the viewer, the human mind, really, you do piece together those things. You just are like, oh, well, if the performance is good enough that I believe the relationship, well, then I can just kind of assume in my own mind what happened. I don't have to be shown or told, frankly, either one.
Well, and the thing is that, like, I feel like we've seen so many bloated movies this year where they could... how many times have we said just on this podcast, like, they could have cut 15, 20 minutes off this movie? And so you don't notice it when that bloat is not there, right? Like, nobody's saying, like, oh, I wish they had spent more time to, on this whatever, like, on this little throwaway thing. But then if they over-explain, you do notice it. And you're like, this is too much.
Yeah, I feel like in the last 20 years, probably really since Lost came out, there's this phenomenon of like fan service around a thing, and there's people who are going to want to talk about the TV show or the movie, and then you get into Marvel and there's all the discussion, which gets into that same process. Yeah. Every loophole has to be filled or explained because it's a mystery or it's connected, and it's trained all of us to go, we need like factual accuracy with every film, and every movie that's historical fiction has to be true to the story, no matter what story you're trying to tell. And so I love now that movies are coming out saying, you're not going to know everything, and that's fine. We're not going to answer every question. That's not what we're trying to do. Feels so refreshing.
Right. A movie doesn't have to be watertight. You know, you don't have to like have like you said, an explanation for every plot thread and every Easter egg, and you know, I totally agree. And I think Marvel as a franchise, that's been one of the things that has utterly derailed them recently, is like an effort to do like focus more on that than simply telling a good story, which they were better at before. Yeah.
Well, and shout 100%. Out to Glenn Weldon on the Pop Culture Happy Hour podcast from NPR.
We all love him so much.
We do, and he wrote an excellent kind of treatise on this whole idea that and he's a huge, you know, comic book Marvel fan and everything, and he said that this fan theorizing that, you know, Game of Thrones and Marvel and all those things, it's kind of poisoned the experience of watching things and just enjoying the experience.
Right. It's like more about your expectations than it is about the thing itself.
You end up disappointed because you've spent hours and hours like dissecting every scene and thinking about what was gonna happen, so you're never gonna be satisfied with the result.
Totally. Yeah.
We've spent enough time talking about what we've been watching. What about you, sir?
Good God. Well, unfortunately, I watched two of those things with you, so half of your list is my list. Other than that, I mean, I wrapped the second season. I wrapped. It's like I was working on it, but I stopped watching. I finished the second season of The Bear. That's really, really great. You've seen the second season, Katie?
Yes, I've seen both seasons. Wonderful.
Yeah, and the second season is markedly different from the first and takes a more kind of, character-to-character approach. It hones in on a character for a couple episodes and another, and it slows down a little bit. It's not so much of the, like, kitchen chaos as the first season is. It circles back on that, surely, by the end. But I really liked it. I liked how, like, you watched them actually open this new restaurant as well. It was a lot, as this show can often be, but I really enjoyed the episode the flashback episode that took place at dinner, their family dinner, that was insane. Like, Cameron, you should stick with the show. I know it's not something I would recommend binging. It's like I need a week in between episodes.
It's a lot.
It's a lot. I have started season 1, and it's extremely intense. We watched like the first 3 episodes back to back, and I was about to kill myself.
Just don't do that, you know? Just do not do that. But if you stick with it long enough to make it to the second season, one episode in particular, this flashback that I'm talking about, it's a little bit. It's actually, most episodes are 30 minutes, and this is like an hour, so it's like a mini movie. Okay. This one, and it's crazy. It gives you so much insight into their family. What is their last name? I'm blanking on it now. Carmen.
Something with the bear in it.
Yeah, it's like Bergamo or I don't know, something like that.
Close enough.
Yeah, whatever. Anyway, that episode is just crazy. It has a ton of great guest stars. It has Jamie Lee Curtis and Bob Odenkirk, and it just really gives you an insight into their family dynamics and who kind of these people are, and you get to spend more time with his brother Michael, the one who killed himself, that kind of inspired him altogether.
Sure.
So that was really, really great. The show overall was fantastic. I'm looking forward to more of it. I like that the second season is somewhat different than the first. Like, it feels like a show that's growing and evolving. That may turn some viewers off, like maybe you, Alex, are, if you're listening. I know people who especially are very familiar with working in a kitchen really thrive on kind of the thing that's hard for you to watch, you know, like the chaos and the intensity. But I would say that if you can kind of like be okay with the show moving away from that, it's very, very rewarding in its second season. So
it's almost like in the second season, they move into the chaos and intensity of each character.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you said, Connor, there are more character episodes, not bottle episodes, but more of a focus. But each of them have, for the most part, their own moments of chaos and stress. And they still do what they did really well in the first season, which is use audio as a way to ramp up the stress. You're always hearing things in the kitchen. You're hearing loud voices. You're hearing yelling, which can be very stressful and hard to binge unless you're a sadist like myself. Just mainlines that. My favorite episode was actually the one right after, I think, episode 6, which was that family episode. Episode 7 focuses on the cousin, Richie, and just a small storyline for him.
Yes.
And again, there is a Taylor Swift tie-in. There is a needle drop in that episode that just had me in a puddle watching it, because you just root for all of these characters so hard in a way that I think with no other TV show today that I'm watching do I feel so invested in everyone being okay. Usually you go into a drama or comedy and you go, okay, conflict needs to happen. Something bad is going to happen to these characters. And I literally sometimes watching The Bear go, if you could just stop and have a little placard on the TV show on the screen that just says, everyone is okay. I would be okay with that as an end to the show.
Yeah. And then that's actually, it's great you bring up that episode, because I felt the same way. And even how Richie's character shows up after that, just in the rest of the show, like the change that he goes through as a result of his experience in that episode. Because it's funny, because Cameron the other day was like talking about the show and he's like, God, Richie is such an asshole. And like,
you're not wrong.
You're so not wrong.
Yeah.
But if you make it this far into the show, you feel so much more deeply about that character and you see so much more complexity and his arc. Like by the time he's doing what he's doing in this episode that we're referring to, and what that how that changes him as a person after that is just in like almost a 180 from like the Richie that you know right now. It's really amazing. And it's seamless.
I mean, even I've only watched like the first 3 episodes or something, but even in that time, they have dropped a little bit of some hints around that. Like they've characterized him a little bit about his daughter and, you know, his relationship with his kids and stuff. And so I don't know. I'm interested enough to keep watching, but man, I don't know if I can keep binging. Good for you.
It takes a certain type.
Yeah.
You have to be a little unhinged like Katie here. Other than that, I finished Hijack, but I've already mentioned that on this show. But finally finished it. They landed the plane, metaphorically and literally. Spoiler alert.
You've been saving that one.
I really have. Yeah, I thought of that like 4 days ago. Yeah, no, it was a pretty good show. I wouldn't say it does not reinvent the wheel or the genre in any special way, but some solid performances. Some early on, there's some character choices that make me go like, raise my eyebrows. But by the end, the direction that it takes, like it gets pretty interesting. It gets a little bigger than just the events of the plane, which at first I was kind of like, all right, I don't know, like, ooh, some bigger threat that you don't see, blah, blah, blah. And that's fine. But they managed to keep it kind of on the rails. And so I'd say if you already started it, so it might be worth finishing. If you're enjoying it thus far, or if you're out there and you're looking for just kind of an easy watch thriller show and you like Idris Elba, definitely check it out.
I mean, Idris Elba is just one of those characters, or one of those actors who I could just spend time with. Like, kind of, no matter what he's in, I just enjoy watching him on screen. So I'll probably finish it.
To that point, I would strongly recommend Beast, which I watched. I wouldn't say, like, well, strongly recommend might be a little strong, but I enjoyed this movie Beast a lot. It's like
You're gonna beach him off.
Yeah, we're gonna. I'll beat you off right now. I'll beat you off in front of Katie.
Barbie is incepting us all.
Yeah, I know. I can feel it. We're almost there. But if you do want to go watch something with Idris Elba, Beast was really good. It's like he and his daughters are in like the African jungle, and they're on kind of a safari tour type thing, and they get attacked by a lion. And, you know, it's like whatever. It's Jaws in the jungle, but it's pretty good. It's entertaining. Like, it's a lean 90 minutes, and if you're just looking to kind of turn your brain off and enjoy, highly recommend. Me and Hanukkah saw it in theaters, and we liked it a lot. I mean, like, wouldn't say, oh my God, you know, weren't singing its praises, but it was really fun. So if you like Idris Elba, check that out as well.
I wish more movies marketed themselves as it's 90 minutes.
Yeah.
I honestly think that
know.
would be pretty effective
Cocaine
marketing.
Bear. I mean, that was basically Cocaine Bear.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know if it was explicit, but you knew what you were getting. If you went to go see Cocaine Bear, you knew it was going to be a 90 minutes in and out.
Right, yeah. You weren't going to get a philosophical, musing on what it means to be a cocaine-filled bear.
Right,
so,
right.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into Barbie, shall we?
Let's do it.
Let's defer to our guest here. What are your first reactions to Barbie?
The Barbie.
I loved Barbie. I would give it a 4 out of 5. I felt like I had very complex feelings coming out of it only because Greta Gerwig is my favorite director right now, really. Her first 2 movies are in my top 5 of all time. I talked earlier about Something Crawling Into Your Heart. Those movies have some of the lines that I consider to be some of just the best writing of the last 5 to 10 years. So my expectations going into this movie were astronomical. It was, will you make a third movie that will be my favorite movie of all time? And the movie Barbie is a true masterpiece. It's so funny. It's so interesting. It does have some phenomenal lines. And because it wasn't Lady Bird or Little Women, I left with a personal star, deducted from it. But I still thought it was very, very funny and just a marvel that it was even made. I just cannot believe they let her write the movie that way. They let her make the movie that way. They let everyone put so much money into the production, like we talked about, into the casting, into the music, into the marketing. I think all of that as a whole, and then I think the second time I saw it, I realized I just wasn't breathing because I was laughing so hard, and then the laughter sort of devolved into tears, and then I was just crying, and I went, okay, that was a pretty good experience. So in short, I quite enjoyed it.
Totally. I mean, yeah, hats off to Mattel and Warner Brothers for kind of giving her that level of free reign. I totally agree with you. And I'm curious, when you say that it's not Little Women or Lady Bird, and that's why you gave it a half a star off, I guess, right? What do you mean exactly?
I think one of the things that Greta Gerwig does really well is universalize some of the specificity of being a woman, and particularly an adolescent. And she did that so well in Lady Bird, and she did it really well, but with kind of a more mature twist in Little Women, in exploring each of those characters and then trying to tell a different part of the adolescent female experience. And so what she does so well is specificity. And I think with a topic like Barbie, you lose inherently, you lose some of that specificity, because even if there's specificity in digging into the history of Barbie and the history of this IP, it's a little bit less about the specific lived experience of being a human, because the whole point of the movie is that Barbie, for so much of it, is an idea or a thing and wants to get to humanness. But that means that some of the moments of humanness in this movie were highlights, but they were much more sparse than in her other work.
At the risk of being maybe a little bit too on the nose here, I think one of the challenges of this movie that you're kind of hinting around is that there's a plasticity of this movie. It is trying to do something very different than Little Women or Lady Bird, right? Lady Bird is almost it's an indie film basically, with some better production value maybe. And Little Women is straight up, that's an adaptation of a period drama. And so this is something very different. It has lots of money behind it. It is very much for general audiences. And I think it still has her stamp on it, her fingerprints for sure. But you do lose some of that specificity, which I think is a good word for this movie. It is more generalized. Sure.
It's laboring under the weight of one of the most broadly appealing brands and toys of all time. It's so I think that's very well put.
And she is tackling harder concepts, I would say, in this movie than she was in Little Women and Lady Bird. I think the themes that I found compelling coming out of the movie were handled so deftly in Barbie, you almost had to dig below that plastic to find it. Or maybe you didn't for some people, but I think the theme of Barbie going from an idea to a human, and the whole world going from this feels fake and very artificial to something more real and lived in. And matching that, I think about how for most of cinematic history, female characters are often more of ideas than actual people.
Oh, that's a good point.
And tracing that history across this movie of what if all of the male characters kind of kept that evolution or started fully as ideas, and she's going from a thing to a human, which she even says at the end of the movie.
Yeah.
That's a really gnarly topic to very deftly handle and show instead of tell. And, and then right at the end when she explicitly says it, it doesn't feel like they're forcing it down your throat. So I think Gerwig is tackling more complex, and none of that is even touching on masculinity or the patriarchy.
Sure.
Or the complex challenges of being a woman in this world. That's just my favorite theme from it. And so I think she's tackling more themes in this movie and handling it all really well. But then you do lose lines like in Lady Bird, where I think the nun says, "Isn't love just attention?" or something like that, where that just sticks with you. So there's fewer of those.
Fewer. And do you think like a viewer that wasn't maybe paying as close of attention would just kind of enjoy the humor and the colors and the, all that stuff without, surely, think to anybody, its messaging is going to get to you at some level. But I agree, you have to be maybe a little bit more savvy of a viewer and looking a little bit more acutely to kind of see what, like, her and Noah Baumbach, to give him some writing credit, have really buried in there. But I'm only giving Noah Baumbach some of a writing credit because the movie is really, really Greta Gerwig's. It has her fingerprints all over it. But yeah, I agree. I think some viewers could miss some of the more nuanced stuff, and it doesn't always. It's juggling a lot of balls. It doesn't always have time to hit on all the next layer, the deeper layer that you're talking about of some of these things. Yeah.
For me, like what you're pointing to, like the scene that will stick with me more than any out of this movie, beyond the jokes, which there are a lot of really funny jokes that are memorable in this movie, but is in the end when she's having this conversation with the inventor of Barbie, right? And they're doing like the whole experience of being a human through like flashbacks, right? And that was a much more show not tell experience, right? Like for a viewer, and it made her existential crisis that she was going through, just 15 minutes previously in the movie, which was played as a joke, right? Like it was like, wow, like how pathetic, like this, she's just crying on the ground, right? But I do think that it made that real, that she's choosing the humanity, the pain and the struggle of being a human over this idealistic, perfect, unchanging world, right? Like it made that real, and it didn't do it by telling you. There was no words. Like it was all images and sound, and that was way more interesting and impactful than the previous hour and a half of the movie, frankly.
Yeah, I loved that scene as well. I think that was my favorite. And the line that the creator of Barbie says of mothers stand still so their daughters can look back and see how far they've come was a line that in the theater I heard audible like sobs, like the uncontrollable sob where you didn't realize you were about to cry and then you suddenly started crying. I think the other moment in the movie like that was Depression Barbie, was the other time where you could hear people laughing when they did not know they were going to laugh that hard. But I completely agree. I think that scene felt, the most lived in and the most real without spelling it all out.
It did. That scene was almost, transcendent. It like took on a life of its own. I mean, as I was watching it in the theater, it's just like, and it's one of those moments in a theater when you can hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
It was very, very special in that way because, a lot of the things that this movie went through in terms of like saying what it's like to be a woman, that but like really what it's like the America Ferrera speech, the patriarchy stuff. I mean, a lot of that I was expecting to some level out of this movie, not to be executed quite as well as it was necessarily, but I was expecting that content or the movie to go in those directions. I did not expect Barbie to want to become a human being by the end of the movie, like for that to be the journey. Like unknowingly at the beginning of the movie when she's presented with the high heel and the Birkenstock, like it's really a question of like, do you want to stay in this fake bullshit or do you want to like become a person? And I didn't quite have my head around that at that point in the movie. So by the time when that comes and that moment is so well done and it's so smart that you meet the creator so briefly and it leaves you with this like, oh, who is that? And they come back to all that and it really perfect. I always use this word like in movies, but it crystallizes really into this kind of perfect moment. And I was blown away by the depth of just taking something like Barbie in that direction, and that level. It's like really amazing. And we haven't even touched on this, but Margot Robbie's performance is really, really incredible.
Yeah.
She's always been a very, very talented actor, but this movie, maybe it's not her best performance ever. She's been asked to do perhaps sometimes more demanding things or things that, might strike you more, but especially by the time this part of the movie and the end of it, for a minute, a lot of it is just like existentialism being played for laughs. And I feel like as an actor, she doesn't have that much to do when she's like on a puddle in the floor. But then by the time you get to this moment, it was like, it really hits you in the feels. And I thought that she in the smallest of ways, I noticed her mannerism change, like when she was Barbie versus when she started becoming more of a person. There was a fluidity to her movement, whereas she was so like robotic
Stilted.
Before, and it's really easy to overplay that as an actor, and she didn't. It was remarkably subtle, and I think a lot of people come out of this movie being like, "Oh, Ryan Gosling was so great; he's such a highlight," and I think he really was, and he was very funny. But I don't know if he's being asked to do something quite as complex as what Margot Robbie was being asked to do, and I think she hit it out of the park.
Yeah, I also don't have any acting background, but noticed...
Yes, you do. I was in a play with you, Katie.
I did a play one time. I sat behind Connor. I had a few lines.
We were in advanced acting together, Katie. You made me cry.
I was told on stage, try to be funny, and when I failed, I started to cry.
Let's be honest.
Probably the beginning of the end. Right there for me.
Let's be honest. Try to be funny is terrible direction.
That is terrible.
Like, sorry.
I think that was the day in class where the thing we were doing in class that day, right between math and, art class next was everyone's going to cry on stage. So let's delve deep into your psyche so that everyone cries. And be funny was the prompt that got me to full-on tears. So yes, that was my brief acting career. But I did notice her mannerisms in her face and seeing even the light behind her eyes and how much she was showing that was going on in her brain. And then throughout the movie, how, exactly like you said, the fluidity, even in just her smile muscles. She's smiling the whole time for the most part, but it's a different smile in the beginning, in the middle, and in the end. It's just a completely different expression.
So true.
Doing that and having that still be something that you want to watch and you're engaged with, especially when there's a Ken on screen as well, is just phenomenal. I have no idea how she did that.
Totally.
Absolutely. I mean, like, she brought a surprising level of nuance to the performance for sure. I think what was notable to me was that coming out of the movie, I was surprised by how much screen time they gave to Ryan Gosling's character and his character arc. In some ways, I mean, I know that it ends with Barbie, but you could make a strong argument that this was a Ken movie. I mean, like, there's a lot of Ken. There's a lot of Ken in this movie.
There's a lot of Ken.
and he was great. I mean, I think he did a lot with what he was given. But I don't know if I was disappointed, but I was definitely surprised by where they took that character. Not necessarily how much empathy they showed for that character. Barbie, again, like, it kind of shows a level of maturity that is beyond Ryan Gosling's character of Ken in this. Like, he thinks pretty simply about things. But it does cast him as fairly sympathetic, even though he completely takes over Barbie Land and turns it into Kendom.
He's still also the villain of the movie, lest we not forget.
Sure. Yeah. I was expecting more Will Ferrell to be the villain, but he really wasn't. I mean, we will have to talk about this, but I don't even really know why Will Ferrell was in this movie.
Yeah, that's arguably the weakest part of the movie.
Yeah, but either way, I mean, it has a lot of sympathy for Ken being neglected and being taken for granted by the Barbies of Barbie Land. And even though they like try to disenfranchise Barbie and like do all these horrible things and turn everything into horse and fur land, they still
put Emma Mackey in a maid outfit.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, really some horrible things that are not particularly generous to anyone in the movie. I was surprised by how it ended with that character being Barbie apologizing to him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it almost felt like, because I think the very obvious parallel in the movie is that Ken is being given the treatment that usually a female character would be given in this movie, and there's so many parallels. Yeah. And it almost feels like the movie then wanted to reverse that by then actually giving him a complete arc and like putting a period on the end of that sentence. But it did drag on a little long. Like, I think when they're in the Barbie dream house, they're having that final conversation about him being enough. There just wasn't a lot of tension in that scene. I was like, okay, I know he will probably be fine. I didn't have any emotional release when he went, I'm enough. And I was like, okay, this plot point has been resolved. So I was like, I see what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it felt a little fluffy compared to other parts.
Absolutely. I mean, I guess that's what I'm pointing to is like, even though it was much less of a developed, nuanced character than Barbie, it spent way too much time on that character arc when that wasn't really the point, and it was played for laughs. I mean, if you're gonna do that, then make it a fully fleshed character, and I don't know, that didn't entirely work for me.
Yeah, I totally agree, especially when thinking about the characters in this movie. The character of Gloria, played by America Ferrera, felt so underdeveloped to me. Yeah. But then she's given like the big emotional speech. And I was like, I have not even seen you outside of the like sponsored vehicle in this movie.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about your life besides the fact you're a mother and you're giving this huge speech. Like, where do you live? What are your challenges? Besides thinking you're boring. Like, I just had so many questions about that character.
Yeah, like arguably I felt more connected to the daughter. Which was like they were trying to reverse that and flip your expectations, and I really did enjoy the reveal of the mother being the one that was making Barbie feel that way and had thrown away the Kate McKinnon Barbie, and I enjoyed that reveal very much, but some of that time spent maybe on Ken could have gone to Gloria for sure. And I like the Ken journey on paper, but I agree. It's like in the delivery, I think there was too much time spent on that, or maybe just a couple too many scenes. The air was kind of let out of the bag somehow. But like you also said, I mean, this kind of like gender reversal, particularly within cinema, I just think that was cool and special to like try and tackle. But yeah, the execution was just a little off. I mean, I think between that, underdeveloping the America Ferrera character Gloria, and like we're saying, some of the stuff with the Will Ferrell character, particularly if it's like in terms of cutting or bloat, like we're talking about 90-minute movies and everything. This movie was phenomenal, and I also think there's maybe a 90-minute version of it living within it somewhere, or hour 45, like not strictly 90, but I think some of the Will Ferrell stuff, some of the maybe Ken stuff could have gone out the window, and it would have been mostly the same, if not a slightly tighter movie. Yeah.
It's funny, I completely agree with you, and it's funny we're talking about this, and I go, oh man, it sounds like we're all like 3 out of 5s on this movie, but I'm curious, like, overall, how you both felt about the movie, because I still am like, oh, this is the funniest movie I've seen all year. I was laughing the entire time, and then starting to talk about it, I'm like, oh, and here are the 5 issues I had with it.
I know.
I'm curious how you both felt.
I think this podcast brings that out in us. We get a little critical. It's definitely. It's like a critique fest, but then we ultimately like, well, I loved it. And I think that it happens because we're just trying to articulate. It's so. If you enjoy a movie, it's almost easier to say the things that you did like about it as opposed to the things that you didn't like. It's harder to articulate that. So, I mean, I we always give out of 10 ratings here. So usually I'm like 9 out of 10 for this movie for sure. If I'm doing out of 5, I'd say 4.5, like somewhere in there. I mean, it's really strong, and even for its weaknesses, I think this is a special movie. Like not like for what it is, for its cultural and pop culture impact, and like I've never seen a theater this full since well before COVID, and people dressed up in pink. I dressed up for the viral marketing campaign of The Dark Knight, and I was like one of 10 people, like no one, people got so excited about this movie. Yeah. Like, so for me, that, and the movie itself, the fact that it's so good and delivers on so many things that the movie promised to deliver on, I think makes it incredibly special, and I still rate it super, super high.
I think there's definitely something to be said for the cultural impact of the movie. The fact that it got people so excited to see it. At the same deal. I mean, I went to Oak Tree a week after it was released, and it was still a packed theater. Tons of people were dressed in pink or in costumes. There was just so much excitement to go see this, and you got to hand it to that. I mean, it clearly resonated with people, so that gives it maybe like a bonus point. I will say that's also a double-edged sword. I came into it with some expectations that it was going to blow my socks off, and I liked it. I don't know that I loved it. I'm probably closer to like an 8 or an 8.5. There were enough things that were like, I don't know about this by the end of it that it cast a little bit of doubt on some of the things that, even though I enjoyed it, I had a good time, I was like, oh man, I was expecting it to be a little deeper than it was. I was a little spoiled for the speech that Gloria gives.
You're listening to too much PCHH, aren't you?
Well, not just that. I mean, from people who had seen it. I mean, like, everybody had seen it before I had at that point, and so I had heard about the speech. And I hate to say it, I don't want to be this guy, but I was a little disappointed. It was a little ham-handed. It was not. It was a hammer more than a scalpel, and so I think, even though I can empathize with what the message was of how hard it is to be a woman and to balance and toe this line of impossible contradictions, like, I appreciate that. I don't know, it didn't quite strike the right balance for me.
I totally agree. And first off, there's never too much PCHH. The limit does not exist.
Oh my God.
I felt the same way. I could tell when that scene came up the first time I saw it. I was like, oh, this is the speech. And again, knowing Greta Gerwig, I went, this speech is going to knock my socks off. Mm-hmm. And it felt like a character telling me a bunch of things that it actually felt like everyone already knew or could agree with. There wasn't the only real insight in the speech, and I felt like it was kind of shoved to the side, was if you, Barbie, are feeling like you're not enough, what hope do any of the rest of us have? And that was interesting. But the whole, you have to be competent, but not too competent. I was like, yeah, we've covered this ground before, and this isn't new. And again, you as a character, Gloria, have not shown us that you're struggling with this at all. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know why you're having this challenge, but it was really only the point of, if you, Barbie, are feeling like you're incompetent, what the fuck are the rest of us doing? Is the only part that felt interesting. So that also fell so flat for me, but I was sitting there being like, oh, like it. You really want to like it. And the truth was, But I saw so many people rapturous about it. Oh,
yeah. It got an ovation in my theater. After the speech was done, people literally did a round of applause for it. But I'm completely with you. I could not agree more. I think at the beginning, I was feeling something when she says, like, emotionally, she says, like, it, like, physically hurts me that you are feeling like this, because what does that mean for women? And then it goes into kind of the middle of the speech, and it loses me. And at the end, it sort of comes back to where she started. But in the end, it just became muddled. It became a muddled message, and I agree. It wasn't covering any new ground. I wish they had hit the editing room a little bit more. That the writers had spent a little bit more time kind of polishing that one off, because I think it could have been a really effective speech, but it didn't quite land.
Interesting. I mean, I might want to challenge some of that slightly. Just, I really think it's a keen observation, yes, that like because her character was underdeveloped, that held that speech back for sure. And I think, I don't know, I feel like that I'm not to put words in your mouth, Cameron, but I feel like that may be some of what you're feeling. And I think that's perfectly valid because if you had seen more about Gloria and her experiencing some of these things, also, it just occurred to me that her name is Gloria. Gloria Steinem, anyone? I mean, Is that a coincidence? I don't know. Movies do things like that. It's possible. There are other feminists in the world, but Gloria Steinem's very famous. Anyway, we can edit that out. I think that's a really sharp observation that like that lack of development really held her that speech back. And we have covered that ground before in movies. But at the same time, watching that speech, I was like, this is the best version of this speech I've ever heard. You know, like and I agree mostly, I think, with everything both of you are saying. And it like in context of the film, like there is something left to be desired. But in context of movies that are trying to discuss that topic, and when you're going to have a speech that's going to do a little bit of telling more than showing, you're like, if you're going to, as a writer, if you're going to try and make that speech, you know that you're going to be a bit talky, and that's just how it's going to be. But so all of those things taken into account, I just think it was like by far the best version of anything like that I've ever heard. Even in a speech about what it means to be a woman, or a speech about being marginalized for your race. You know, there's a number of examples you can point to in media where someone's trying to communicate something like that. And this is just, I thought, was by far the best. I mean, I see what you're saying about heavy-handed, but again, like almost by nature, a speech like this is going to be heavy-handed. So I think that what they actually said, and then the construction of the speech, and like, you know, from a writing standpoint, I thought it was like about as good as it like basically could have been. But, you know,
I think that's a very good point, that there are not a lot of movies making this speech, and certainly not making this speech as well as Barbie did. Thinking about it now, I almost want, and I know this is not going to be the case, but I think of that speech as pairs. You know, there's always the comparison pairs of, you know, be confident but not too confident, be nice but not too nice, or whatever those are. I would almost want Greta Gerwig to go make a movie that captures, because there are so many of those that encompass what it is to be a woman in society. I almost go, okay, can you just knock out each of those one by one with its own movie?
Yeah.
Where the theme is just this, you know, this one, you know, challenge. You know, this is this one challenge. Because there's just so much in that speech that really every single one of those comparison pairs could be its own movie where you just tackle motherhood, career, looks. Like, there's just so much in that. And I think that's one of the other things where I think the speech rubbed me the wrong way, is other parts of the movie did such a good job of having little nods, again, to the specificity. I'm a broken record. But again, Depression Barbie hit me and some of my friends so hard. That was like a scalpel. And the speech was a little bit more like a hammer.
Yeah.
But then when you've got a movie that has a couple scalpels in it, that gets so much closer to home. And then the hammer, even if it's the best hammer you've ever seen, is like, oh, okay, we're being hit a little bit.
That's totally fair. Yeah. I mean, well, I find it interesting that you say that like each of those pairs almost could be like their own kind of a movie. And I think that's totally true. And I guess, too, just because I'm a man with my little man brain, you know, the sheer volume of those comparisons, like, I think that's part of the speech, and that's part of what makes it somewhat successful for me, is it is a hammer, but it's like, it hammers you enough times that, like, as a guy, I'm like, okay, well, I knew that about the looks, and I knew that about being nice, but then you get to, like, pair 10, 11, 12, and I'm like, holy shit, like, you know, not all those had occurred to me. Like, fuck, that's fucking hard. That sounds like a real job to be a woman. Like, I'm glad I'm just sitting here farting in my pants, because, like, damn. You know, so I think you know, it's like it being an avalanche is a failure and a success in some ways. I felt like just the sheer wave of that was so, like, just hit so hard that I was like, yeah, like I said, some of that had occurred to me, but I was like, damn, when you really hear it all listed off like that, it's like, shit, I take some shit for granted, I think, as a guy. So, yeah.
It pairs really nicely with the one scene of Gloria's husband going, Boligrafo on the couch. Going, what's he doing at home these days?
That got a laugh out of me.
Duolingo and chill. That's it.
Yeah.
That was okay, Ken was hilarious, but that might be the funniest male portrayal in the whole movie. Like, he has, like, 2 scenes like that. It's and he's in the car, he's like... He doesn't speak in English the whole movie. He just keeps doing that. I want to be that as an actor. That's great.
I think that's a good segue to... I would love to just briefly talk about some of the favorite bits that worked for us in this movie. For me, Kate McKinnon as Weird Barbie was like... Every time she was on screen, it worked for me. I was in hysterics when she was doing the splits and stuff on the wall and like just trapezing off of the balcony and stuff.
So good.
I think this is the part she was born to play.
It was so good.
Seriously.
She really looked like she was in her element. Like she was just happy to be there.
She got called ugly like 3 times by Margot Robbie.
They kept apologizing for talking about her like when she wasn't there and also to her face.
So funny.
I just love at the end when it's like, oh, would you like a position in my cabinet? She's like, can I please have sanitation? Yeah, that fits.
Jesus. So good.
Alan was great. Michael Cera delivers another great performance on that one.
He was.
Oh, note perfect. Note perfect.
He continues to grow on me. I mean, everybody associates him with Superbad, but he was so funny in This Is the End. As this cocaine addicted version of Michael Cera, and I think everyone had kind of dismissed him because he was this like Freaks and Geeks guy. He was just like easy to
He wasn't
dismiss.
on Freaks and Geeks.
Oh no, sorry, I'm thinking of Seth Rogen.
Yeah,
but he was an Apatow guy.
He was an Apatow
Superbad
guy, for sure.
And like Juno.
Just easy to kind of like pigeonhole in this one role, and this was so much more interesting.
Well, I think it's funny because ever since This Is the End, I feel like he's taken these roles that kind of play off of his Michael Cera-ness.
Yeah.
It's like it's very self-aware. Because Barbie, he's really good. I mean, I don't know if either of you have seen No, it's not Everybody Hates Joan. Joan is awful. It's one of the newest episodes in the Black Mirror season, the latest one. Not to give anything away, because I won't, since you both haven't seen it, but Michael Cera pops up in that, which is very unexpected, and it's hilarious. So it's more of the same, like he's playing off of like, and Alan is kind of that. I mean, setting aside the fact that Alan is like clearly gay and everything, and that has nothing to do with Michael Cera, but his just kind of like awkward standing there and just being like this adjacent guy is definitely playing off of his kind of like awkward Michael Cera.
Well, he's adjacent to adjacency. Like,
right.
Ken is already adjacent to Barbie, and so he's just like a complete afterthought.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought Michael Cera was wonderful in this role, and like you said, I think it plays really well with what we think Michael Cera should be, and then adds a little twist to it. Mm-hmm. I almost wanted him to have more lines in the movie because his delivery was so good, and every time he was in a scene I was expecting him to have more lines because I was like, oh, everything you say is funny. I thought he was just absolutely wonderful.
When he popped up in the car, I almost thought we were gonna get that, like a little bit more of a scene with him and stuff, and they ended up just like going back or whatever, but I felt bad for him. He's like, oh yes, I'm out of here. He's like, no, we're going back. He's like, oh, okay.
I think my favorite line of, not a bit, but my favorite line of the movie that keeps coming back to me was when Barbie's in the real world and she's crying because the young girl Sasha has just insulted her.
Right.
And she says, she called me a fascist, but I don't control the railways or the flow of commerce. Yeah. It's just, I think, one of the top 10 lines I've ever heard. Because again, you could poke at it and go, why does Barbie know what fascism is?
Right.
What does she know about the railways? And it just doesn't matter. It is such a funny line. Every time I even think about it, I just start laughing.
That's a great example. Yeah.
There are a couple throwaway lines like that just for whatever reason hit me. Like there's the one guy who's like in Will Ferrell's cabinet or whatever, and he's like two wise trees.
That part is so weird.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing is like they're such good writers because the throwaways aren't throwaway.
Yeah.
That's the whole thing. You know, I remember thinking that about like 30 Rock when I watched it. It's like there's no wasted air.
That's a good comparison, I think. This gave me a lot of 30 Rock vibes.
Yeah, just the joke density.
Yeah.
Everything you hear could be a funny line. Like the first time I watched it, I didn't even hear Alan's line about how Alan's had escaped before, but just no one noticed or cared. And he said, it's in sync. Yes, including the one you're thinking of. I hadn't even heard that the first time. Oh my God.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and also just like the characters that you're not supposed to take seriously, like all of the goofiness of the characters is very 30 Rock too. Like Tracy Morgan, like there's 100 Tracy Morgans in this movie.
Sure. Totally. Mostly Kens.
Mostly Kens.
Is Tracy Morgan just a Ken, but retconned back into 30 Rock?
Totally.
Now that I have this lens, yeah.
And I will say, the scene where Ryan Gosling is playing guitar to Barbie, and then it slowly zooms out and all of the Kens are doing that, I will say, that was, for me, one of the funniest moments in the movie.
Totally.
I had to really go through like a personal inventory and go, okay, I'm not a big fan of that Indigo Girls song, but I do love Matchbox 20. Where do I sit on this spectrum? Because I'm concerned, because I'm clearly not supposed to like this song.
So funny.
Ryan Gosling delivers a pretty good Matchbox 20, I gotta say.
He does. And I will. He nails it. Oh, I love the dance sequence with Simu Liu and Ryan Gosling. That's really, really great. Those kind of set pieces that pop up are really, really great. Yeah.
The infatuation with horses.
Yes, that running joke is great.
Yeah.
Yep. Just his behavior as soon as he hits the real world and he like starts to wrap his head around the patriarchy, that immediate shift in behavior is just so funny. Like, you know, he's talking to that doctor. He's like, she's like, no, you can't like go do surgery. He's like, but I'm a man. And she's like, yeah, but I'm a doctor. He's like, no, where's the guy in the white coat? Like, it's like, I don't know. This is crazy.
I think we do have to talk a little bit about the marketing, which maybe attaches to all the product placement and commercialism.
Sure.
Yeah, marketing, music. Yeah, we can touch on some of that stuff. Yeah. Well, okay. Let me just throw in my comment that I was thinking about. It struck me because I was aware of the Barbie soundtrack before actually seeing the movie. Like, I just know that it was being made. I heard the Dua Lipa song. They'd released a few singles from it that I'd kind of checked out, but I had no idea how much it would actually play into the movie, the soundtrack. Like, what an inseparable part of that it was. And in like this meta way, like including the marketing, including the soundtrack, it's like I loved how the commercialism thing was just baked right into the cake. Like without drawing too much attention to itself. It like most movies wouldn't have a pop soundtrack that it would rely on so heavily, but that made it sort of inseparable from the product that it was, which is very much exactly what Barbie is reckoning with throughout the whole movie. You know, she's this product that wants to be more, and so I just found that kind of interesting. And also just the music, it happens to be fantastic. I love that Dua Lipa song. I loved the Lizzo song that actually appeared twice.
Yeah.
That was completely unexpected for me, because I think they released one version of it on the album that I think I'd listened to, but then when you revisit that song and it's like death and all that was just really... That was incredibly creatively well done. Like, talk about good directing and stuff on part of Greta Gerwig. A brilliant move. I don't know if I've ever seen that kind of meta weirdness with music before and a pop star like Lizzo. I don't think I've ever seen that quite in a movie before. And it was just exciting in how fresh and playful that it was.
Yeah, I thought the music was very good. And I don't know if this is intentional, but oftentimes, historically in rom-coms, because rom-coms and movies targeted at women have lower budgets, oftentimes the music is much, much worse. And oftentimes the songs they'll use, rather than having a score or rather than getting the big budget pop songs, they will just recycle old pop songs. And that's just kind of a thing about rom-coms, is that they don't have the funding to actually have good music. And I had not thought about this before, but it's kind of nice to almost see that turned on its head, where it's still going to be pop music. It's still going to be, bespoke songs that could sell as singles, but it's going to be good pop songs, and it's going to be the best of the best.
From the biggest artists.
Exactly. It's going to be Mark Ronson and Dua Lipa and Lizzo and Charlie XCX. Like, you're going to get the best of the best for this.
I didn't even know Mark Ronson was the producer, and it makes total sense. Really good. I guess he did the score too, along with another person. Like, they just released the score, and it's like Mark Ronson and this other guy, but they did it together. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I thought that was phenomenal. I've also been listening to the singles from that just on repeat ever since.
So great. Yeah.
I think the marketing for this movie, it was so interesting. It was clearly so effective. I heard someone say everyone who came into the movie the first few weekends came in already fans of the movie, which helps the movie so much, and the fact that it can live up to that. And it was so aggressively marketed. I mean, it was just everywhere. There was every kind of product cross-promotion. I looked up Barbie cast today, in preparation for this podcast, and Google still made the whole screen pink and covered in confetti. I don't even know how this happened.
That was a thing?
Yeah, apparently it's everywhere. And apparently one of the WB marketing execs was talking about the marketing strategy for this movie and said they did something they've never done before, which is use the word hate in their marketing promo, because the tagline was, if you love Barbie, this movie's for you. If you hate Barbie, this movie's for you.
Right.
Yeah.
And he said, we would never already put into a consumer's mind that they might hate this thing. Like, just that's advertising 101. But we tried it for this movie, and it was actually super successful, because then it made it seem like whatever your visceral reaction is, we're already saying you should still come and see the movie.
That's a fantastic point. Oh my God. You're right. That's like the biggest marketing no-no ever. But it's like the best tagline. It's such a good tagline.
The one thing that I would say, though, is that I think it was really effective marketing, and they rode the wave of organic enthusiasm around this movie. Like, the second this movie was announced, I was hearing about it from everyone. And so, like, yes, they realized they had a good thing in their hands that they wanted to, like, make the most of. But there was already just a level of enthusiasm around this movie that Oppenheimer didn't get, that Mission Impossible didn't get, that none of the big budget movies that came out this year got. Barbie was the one, and it won. I mean, it won all of the box office possible comparisons.
Well, and yeah, like I feel like I saw this meme on Twitter for a while, like, this Barbie is a blank, and I think they just released posters, that basically inspired that. So they didn't really predict that. But then as soon as it became a meme, they doubled down.
Right.
So they, like you said, they took that natural, organic word of mouth or enthusiasm and just completely doubled down on it. And we're like, oh yeah, this works. And Warner Brothers could use a lot more of that in some other projects. But,
well, I think that's the thing, though, right? Is that if they had been forcing the issue, it wouldn't have been as effective. That's what they tried to do with The Flash, for instance, right?
Sure.
There was already a foundational level of excitement around this movie that they didn't have to manufacture.
Right.
And so then they could just do whatever the hell they wanted. They could have yoga sessions and literally it's everywhere. I see it everywhere. Pink is all over the place.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's almost such a ubiquitous piece of IP, which is different than a lot of the, the early days of Marvel, where it's IP, and so you have a dedicated fan base who's going to get the in-jokes if, say, you made posters like they did for Barbie. But this one is so... everyone knows what Barbie is, and everyone has some affiliation.
Right.
Just enough that you can make things like that will catch on with just enough people, where your fan base for engagement is just so much bigger.
Yeah.
I know the next movie they're looking at doing is Polly Pocket, and
I
was born in the 90s. I had a lot of Polly Pocket, but I don't have the world does not have affiliations with Polly Pocket at all.
And nearly at the same
It
level.
does concern me a little bit that they're already creating the BCU.
Yeah.
The other MCU, the other Mattel cinematic
Yeah, I
universe.
guess so, yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited. Well, I'm cautiously optimistic because Lena Dunham's last directorial effort, which was Catherine Called Birdie, another recommendation on Amazon, highly recommend, was really, really, really good and very deftly handled. And so I'm hoping that if Lena Dunham can also have creative control and if it's written by the right person, maybe we'll see. But I would also just love to leave this one. Leave Barbie up on the pedestal it's built for itself.
And that could very well turn out to be a decent or pretty great film. But this is one of those things that's like lightning just struck.
Yeah.
If you're expecting lightning to strike twice, well,
and
maybe.
that was part of the appeal, was that it's not part of an extended universe. It was something that was new and interesting and fresh, and so if they try to just rehash it, I think it's not going to be nearly as effective.
Well, we talk a lot about IP on here, and I think you're right. You know, it's like, it's one thing when, like, people aren't necessarily just turned off because, oh, it's IP, it exists already, it's a brand. Well, no, I'm not going to go see Barbie because I protest Hollywood's use of IP. Nobody thinks like that. They're just exhausted by existing IP being milked for every drop that it has. You know, you could start something. You could take some other product and make a film out of it. You know, I mean, Super Mario Brothers. I watched it again with Annika, actually, just to show it to her. She enjoyed it more than we did, and so. That's another example, though. That movie made $1 billion as well.
Yeah.
And it's not like something where people didn't have any prior... There's tons of prior association. It's clearly IP, but it's not being beaten to death in the way that, like, superheroes or, you know, other action franchises are. So, yeah. Give us some box office numbers there, Katie. Did you have any... No? Or not specific numbers, but... I guess I alluded to the fact that Barbie... just made a lot of money, but you had a fact about that.
Yes, it just passed 1 billion this last weekend, which makes Gerwig the first solo female film director to have a movie hit 1 billion. And the other movies who have surpassed that have female co-directors are, I think, Frozen and Frozen 2.
Really?
And maybe...
Nothing from Catherine Bigelow?
No. For the big blockbusters, it's like Frozen, Frozen 2, and then I think Wonder Woman didn't hit 1 billion, but is in the top 20.
It's like 800 or something.
Yeah, but all of the other female film directors on the top list all have co-directors, except for Greta now.
Really? Well,
Yeah.
that's great.
Way to
That's
go.
awesome. I mean, and this is only her third feature, to your point.
Yeah, I think she's working on Chronicles of Narnia next,
Oh, man.
which makes me a little nervous, but I have to remind myself that she got to pick whatever project she wanted to do. I think she has some attachment to this material, and so I'm very much in the camp of trust Greta, and we'll see where it goes. But I would
Buckle
love
up for some Christian allegory.
I am buckled. I'm already concerned. But I'm hoping she writes some more in the future and can get back to that.
Yeah, I mean, if she pours her heart and soul into it the way that she has with her last 3 movies, then, you know, it could easily be better than the other movies and TV shows we've seen from that world. So, yeah.
I will definitely give it a shot because I agree with you. Like I'll give Greta the benefit of the doubt. I will say I had been hoping that a talented director like this, and this goes for any talented director, would do something that isn't such established IP. Like do something more interesting and unique than a book that's been around for 70 years.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think I'm just pushing myself into the optimist camp because I'm too scared to be anywhere else.
It sometimes seems like these talented Hollywood directors that suddenly get their kind of big break, or I mean, she's already kind of had her big break, but like when you reach that stratospheric level as a director, I've seen a lot of them kind of lean towards the IP direction. It's kind of interesting, you know. There's like a curiosity.
For sure.
Yeah. But I can't imagine they're all exclusively driven by the dollar signs, but maybe. But I think there's also like a curiosity to tackle it, you know? Like, why would Christopher Nolan even try to take on Batman? Why would he even be like, if you think about Chris Nolan and like wanting to do everything practically and like, why the hell would that even interest someone like that? I think it's interesting when directors have their moment, they oftentimes, it's like a challenge, you know, it's like, can I actually take this crap and make it really fucking good? Like, that's kind of what it seems like.
Yeah, according to Gerwig's agent in an interview, she's interested in doing big studio films from here on out. And granted, that's her agent. Her agent's always going to go, yes, she's going to go do all the big money things. But it is interesting and surprising to read that and hear that, and changes my expectations for the next 10 years.
Yeah. I mean, that's in part because big studios are interested in having Greta Gerwig do things for them. So, I mean, I think there's a bit of a marriage there, right?
They're crawling over themselves.
Yes.
100%.
Well, this has been a really good conversation. Thanks for joining us, Katie.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here. I love talking nerdy film stuff with other film nerds. Mostly it's just me yelling at my husband in the car and him going, uh-huh.
I know how that feels, the reverse. Well, not the reverse, but just I'm the one doing the talking. But no, you really elevated this, Katie, or you really elevated this podcast, Katie. Like, it's really been great, you know? Great discussion. Great to have your brain here and your perspective. So,
welcome back
awesome.
anytime.
Please, yeah, let's do this again. Say it's one of our best so far.
I'll be back for the next $1 billion female-directed blockbuster hit. It'll be next month, right?
Yeah. Hopefully we don't have to wait too long.
Shit, you took the words right out of my mouth. Yeah. If Ken has his way, it'll be another 10 years, but we'll see. Yeah. Alrighty.
All right, see you next time.
Till next time.